Hello and welcome to If I Ran the Shakespeare Project. We have several ex-incarcerated actors, returned citizens with us here today who are going to share with us their ideas about what they would do if they had the opportunity to run their own Shakespeare Prison Project, and who better to know that? We're really eager to hear what they have to say. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the panelists, beginning with myself. My name is Dr. Jonathan Shailor. I'm a professor of communication and conflict resolution at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. I've published books and essays on conflict resolution and prison theater, and I'm the editor of the book Performing New Lives, Prison Theater, which was published in 2011. I'm the founder and director of the Shakespeare Prison Project in Wisconsin, a program which is now in its 16th year. And we're pleased to have two alumni of the Wisconsin Project joining us here today. Maybe they could give a wave. First of all, Michael Shortt is a master fabricator and journeyman welder. He's been in and out of prison for the last 13 years for issues related to substance abuse. Mike grew up in a small town, but traveled frequently throughout his life. As a child, he developed interests in guitar, metal art, classic literature, computers, and theater. He's been part of 21 theater productions since his release, including staged plays, musicals, and virtual productions of Shakespeare plays. Mike continually, I should say currently and continually, resides in Southeast Wisconsin and continues to grow and benefit from his experiences with the Shakespeare Prison Project. Haisan Williams, just a week shy of his 50th birthday, has served 24 years from 1991 to 2019 in the Wisconsin prison system for a multitude of offenses. A lifelong reader, writer, suppliant, and student, his incarcerations fed his passion for all of the above. His involvement in the first 4 Shakespeare Prison Project productions rekindled that passion. Since his 2013 release, he has performed and presented scenes and, in a public speaking forum, shared the story of his life, highlighted by his 2016 involvement in the Chicago Shakespeare Theater panel discussion in the criminal justice system. He's currently married to an amazing woman with whom he heads a large pet family featuring Brutus, Cassius, Ariel, Desdemona, and Juliet. He is employed in the transportation industry, the owner of 2 rental properties, and lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Welcome, gentlemen. And now to Australia. Dr. Rob Pensalfini, my co-host, is an associate professor of linguistics and drama at the University of Queensland, Australia. He's published several books and numerous articles in both linguistics and drama, including the book Prison Shakespeare, For These Deep Shames and Great Indignities, published in 2016. He leads Australia's only ongoing prison Shakespeare program and is the artistic director of the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble. And we're pleased to have an alumnus of the Queensland Project joining us here today, Stephen James. Stephen served 18 years in prison, and in his words, he used that time to, quote, understand my youth, my experiences, my core beliefs, to unravel how I had progressed to the state of mind and perspective at the time of my offense. While in prison, Stephen completed degrees in history, literature, and theology. Since his release, he has walked the boards in his first live theater performance, participated in live readings of Shakespeare, and is still an avid reader of classical literature and philosophy. Steve is developing a podcast series and is about to launch a not-for-profit organization to assist returned citizens with reintegration. So welcome, gentlemen, and let's begin. Rob, take it away.
It's a really exciting topic. Before we get, though, to the meat of the question, if I ran the Shakespeare Prison Project, I think it'd be great to hear from each of you a little bit about some of your experiences with the prison project as you met it, as you encountered it. I'd love for each of you to reflect on what was best about your time with your respective Shakespeare projects. Maybe even you could sort of ground that in a particular story, a particular experience that you had that is somehow representative or emblematic of your involvement over the years with your Shakespeare Prison Project. Michael, would you be willing to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a friend of mine once described prison as a cemetery for the living. And my experience with Shakespeare basically turned that on its head. Um, when we had all these classes and we wrote in our journals and we acted, yes, a lot of it was about Shakespeare, but it was more like a conduit for, you know, trying to deal with being in prison. Just the fact that we were depressed and we were angry and we had all kinds of animosity towards the world and ourselves. And I clearly still remember one particular situation that really didn't have anything to do with Shakespeare per se, but like there was it was a real thing that happened. We had somebody that was in our group that was making like unwanted advances towards another group member, right? And in a place like prison, that's a really dicey situation. I mean, it can end up resulting in violence or death or whatever. And instead of turning away from it or avoiding it, that situation actually came out as part of our group discussions. And instead of anybody getting in trouble or going to the hole or there being a fight, which would have resulted in really nothing and probably just more deeply entrenched, people's pre-existing like feelings and behaviors, we really picked it apart. And the facilitator, John, he managed to help navigate through that situation. And because of that, I think the issues that those people were having with each other and all of us that were even part of the discussion, we learned a lot about boundaries, about, respect and empathy for each other. And it's strange because the play that we were doing at the time that happened was like a Midsummer Night's Dream. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that we were doing Cymbeline, King of Britain. And we encountered, a situation with a guy in there named Iachimo, and it was a really sort of creepy scene. And that came up again. It had staying power because we had unpeeled that situation and we had explored it in those groups. That empathy grew and it actually became part of a ripple effect of impacting another play that started another discussion with a whole lot of other people. And that never ceases to amaze me how the tendrils of the things that happen in this program, bear fruit further down the road. And that to me is the most amazing thing. I still think about the experiences that I had in Shakespeare now, even though I'm out and I'm out of prison. It was the best part of my prison experience.
Thank you, Michael. I love that image of ripples and the way that things ripple through both time and space. I think that's a really powerful image. Thank you. Well, we might as well stay with the Wisconsin project and hear Haisan's perspective and perhaps a story from you and what were some of the best things that you got out of your involvement.
There are a couple things that really stand out. I think Dr. Shailor and I often share an experience that it was during Othello when the gentleman who was playing Desdemona had dealt with some insecurities and some issues with regard to playing a female character and being characterized as effeminate as a result of that. And we were watching, because we used to videotape our sessions, we were watching um, a scene where he was dressed like a female and someone made an inappropriate comment and excuse me, and then tried to pull the chair away from he pulled the chair away from when he sat down, and it created a situation where this is prison, man. And it could have instantly been hostile. And two of us stood up. Matt, Doctor, I'm not sure, I can mention his first name, not last. Matthew stood up and said, "Hey man, hold on. You guys calm down. Let's talk this out." And we began a process that uh, sort of came to edify what exactly the Shakespeare Project resulted in being about, which was working through emotions and understanding situations a little bit more. And as a group, we problem solved, and it's so much similar to what Michael shared. And our project, our presences did not overlap, but it goes to speak, I think, to the strength of what was kind of the foundation of what we did, is that we were able to have this process to work things out. And the strength of what we did kind of transformed into this environment where it became so therapeutic, that theater was secondary, that the embodiment and understanding characters and scene work was the result of understanding emotional needs, and then transforming that through our own emotional processes, and realizing that through this art, we're kind of getting to know who the hell we are. It's cathartic in that way. And I had previously heard someone characterize that cathartic, and I thought he was overstating it. But as I reflect on it, it absolutely was a very cathartic moment in my life, or period in my life, where my abilities to comprehend what exactly the depth of what I had done was, and kind of take it through understanding other characters' emotional needs, and then examining my own through our process, our group process. I was able to, I think through the 4 years that I was involved in the project, I grew because as the project grew, my understanding of myself. So.
Thank you. And the story that you told about Desdemona, and also Michael's story, remind me, as I often remember the kid quote from the Spanish tragedy, where words prevail not, violence prevails. And that replacing of violent action with talking things through. That's lovely. Let's cross the Pacific, bring it home to a rainy Saturday morning here in Queensland. And Steve.
Hi guys, thanks for having me here. I often say that I wasn't embarrassed about being in prison, as you might think. I was embarrassed about what I did to get to prison. So for me, I spent a lot of years trying to unravel how I thought, my core beliefs that led me to condone my actions. And in retrospect, I think there was a slipping away from community. There was a slipping away from society. I was disillusioned with the narrative and the rhetoric. And that made me a pariah of sorts, and on the outskirts of society. And I still recall the first day walking into the prison Shakespeare room. I had separated from society. I'd been sent to prison, and now my family ties were severed, but also my identity. Being in prison, it's a precarious place, and sometimes that management is minute by minute. So to live there, you have to become a different person. And then I walk into the Shakespeare group, and there's 5 people there sitting on the ground with no agenda at all. They said to us they weren't there to fix us, they weren't there to judge. We were gonna play. And through that process of meeting the outside actors, and of course the actors that were with me within prison, we came from different sectors, ages, histories, backgrounds. Together as a little community, we problem solved together, we trusted each other, we were vulnerable, we looked at each other's eyes and we conveyed messages. We grew together as a little society. And for me, I could see how that should be reflected in the society that we live in out here. We each do our little bit to try and push the narrative further and better. And it comes together at the end, which as individuals we couldn't do.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the aspect of community has always been really powerful for me too. And thank you to all 3 of you. I think Jonathan's got a question for you now.
I do. In the spirit of appreciative inquiry, based on what was the best of your experience with your Shakespeare projects, what would you recommend that we keep doing? And if you were to do your own Shakespeare project, what would you continue to do in your practice based on what you've already experienced? So why don't we go in the same order? Michael?
Oh, this is a great question. I like where all this stuff is going. Honestly, you know, John, one of the best things that I think that you were able to accomplish at the facility that I was at and that you facilitated at, and I didn't realize was not that common, was the amount of time that you were able to advocate for us to have program time. You know what I said before about the whole cemetery for a living thing, that was absolutely true. That program was an escape in some ways, but it was a healthy one. It was one that nurtured, the best parts of ourselves. And having, at least 4 hours a week that we did, I think that is hugely important, because the more time that I invested into the program, the more important it became to me, and the more I was able to contribute and the more I was able to get out of it. And I think that's like anything. It doesn't matter if you're learning a skill or whatever. The more time that you spend in that space, even if it's a mental space, you can't help but not improve, yourself with that. And I would absolutely continue to do that. I'm sure there's plenty of people that would mumble and grumble about, having to go there and spend the time. But I think secretly we always did. We looked forward to it. And even the people that were like, oh, I wanted to watch a football game, or, oh, I wanted to do this, or I want to do that, knowing that it was a place that we were supposed to be, that we were where we were accountable to be, and that we had a role and a responsibility. I think that is hugely important. I think increasing, or at least keeping the same amount of time, which for us was 2 days a week, at least 2 hours, a day, usually 3 or whatever. I would absolutely continue to do that. I would not pare the amount of time down at all. And like I said, the reason for that is because we feel invested, and you get more accomplished that way.
I just wanted to say thank you for that. Time does really make a difference, and you said it, so I'm not going to repeat it. Let's move on to Haisan.
What I wanted to say was about creating the environment, right? Well, respecting that time, coming prepared, creating the environment where people understood this was not just an opportunity to come and have fun, but you took on a responsibility to yourself, to your team, to your castmates, to your fellow brother, which is what we became. And in the spirit of that, also having that balance of knowing that, yeah, this is therapy, this is theater, this is work too. So you come prepared, be like, the expectation is that you be your best in every aspect that you're supposed to bring to the table. Your chops need to be in order. Your line preparation needs to be in order. Your memorization, your study, and you coming prepared and contributing, and also your journal work and the whole package, the balance, creating that environment where the understanding is there. Like this is not just a one-dimensional thing where we end up putting on a play. This is an experience where you get to evolve into and earn the right to perform William Shakespeare.
Thank you, Haisan. So time, effort, pride, excellence, great themes. How about you, Stephen?
One of the things that I enjoyed mostly walking into Rob's room was that we were all on the floor. To start the program, we paid homage to traditional owners. We sort of wiped away all the grime from the prison, our biases, and we just came together as a unitary group. But particularly in one of the sessions with Rob, we had a mock media presentation, which I thought was great. The actors set up and acted as reporters, and we would be in role drilling our character. So for me, I was able to lock down my character outside of the lines, which I thought was pertinent. And even now in certain situations, being a returned citizen, there's anxiety in certain situations. You can take that character on, and you can, if you walk onto a bus, you can just breathe that character and be someone else for 5 minutes, and use that as your motivation to move forward or to relieve stress.
So was that mock media, your character being interviewed by a reporter and you're improvising your answers?
Yes, yeah. So that's what I would do. That throughout the whole day, try and get around the prison in your character so that you can own who that person is supposed to be, so that you can see in different situations how he would feel or she would feel. And then you can bring that holistic approach into that tiny space when you're actually delivering lines.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I believe that Rob has the next question.
Yes, I do. Steve, I totally forgotten that we did that. Thank you for reminding me. So being down under, we'll turn it upside down. We've heard of what you'd love us to keep doing. What do you wish we would stop doing? So are there any practices or parts of the project that aren't working, that are either unfulfilling, destructive, counterproductive, or just don't add anything? And because we're down under, we'll go in the opposite order. So Steve.
Like Haisan said, it's all therapeutic. So I don't know that there was anything destructive. It all worked its way, and I'm sure it helped different people at different times. But the one aspect I didn't look forward to was when we broke down our speeches word by word and acted out. So to, be, or I just felt like I would have more enjoyed breaking down maybe a segment of thought, and then maybe rehearsing it from a different aspect, or maybe putting emphasis on different words. So I felt like the 10 or 15 minutes where we broke down one word and then two words and then three words, I would have much rather break it down into its thoughts.
Excellent, thank you. Haisan.
I got to tell you, really quick, I love the interview. I would love to do that with any character I ever played in any other. That's awesome. I think the one I don't, and I agree with you as well, Stephen, that it was all therapeutic, but there were times where certain group members would hijack time for their own personal agendas. And it was transparent past a point, and we invested time in it. But again, it was therapeutic to the extent that, I mean, because people were very frank. I remember once calling somebody out for being transparent about an attempt to move into a role that he had not earned. And while I may not have said it in the most diplomatic way, the truth is that it added to the process where we were able to challenge beliefs and examine all the thoughts behind it. So again, it was therapeutic, but the way people were sometimes able to hijack time for personal agendas did tend to take away. But again, it was therapeutic. So I guess at the end of the day, it's a win.
Thank you, Haisan. Michael.
Okay, so this is kind of a 1-2 punch here. I understood why variety is important to keep people on their feet and to sort of like change things up a little bit, but the movement exercises, the videos that we had, be a tree in the wind, all that stuff. It was great, and it was fun to a degree, but it became more of a situation that contributed, like in a prison environment, it created a sense of like awkwardness, and I think it actually ended up like making people feel weird and out of sorts, so that by the time that we actually started rehearsal after that, to a certain set of people in a certain mindset that might be more effective. And having variety, we did the puking dinosaur and all kinds of great exercises in order to get people moving, and I appreciated that. But I think letting the acting get people moving and stuff would have been a more beneficial and more rewarding exercise. So I would probably stop having movement exercises outside of the dialogue, and incorporate it into that. And we did do a lot of that, but there was a lot of time spent on bringing in weird be a tree videos. So, I would probably say we could cut that.
I bet our audience is wondering about all the subtext here. Well, someday we'll get to that. Our next question, we've talked about what you would stop doing. Here's your big moment. What would you start doing? What would you create? What would you introduce? What would be unique about your program? So this time I'll scramble the order yet again and ask Haisan to go first.
I would, and I of course, in thinking of this, there's so many things I would want to do, but I think kind of sell the whole thing as we want to create an actor. And this is what an actor is. An actor is a person who can, through his own emotional depth, through his own understanding of himself or herself, is able to understand that of another person. And then embody that through that understanding to transform themselves into that person and become that person. And think of and sell it like, why do you think actors make so much? Because they're able to. Al Pacino was able to convince you that he was Cuban. Go that deep. Challenge yourself. Sell that. Sell that challenge. Sell that creation of $1 million skill that has value beyond money. Because when you get there, you understand that that was the real journey. That's what I'll sell.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of layers in what you just said. Hopefully we can unpack them later on. I'm going to let it lie for now and ask that we go to Steve. We're mixing up the groups.
Yeah, well, to further Hassan's point, I know that in the States there's a lot more people vying to get into the program. What I would ask people that want to join would be an audition process. So I would say go away for a year, find a monologue or a speech or an act that you want to do, and come back and embody that act. And because Shakespeare has so many relevant points across the board through sonnets, through his plays, everyone will find something pertinent within the Shakespeare's scrolls to touch with. I would also ask, like Haisan was saying, through that audition process, think about the victims of your crimes and find something in Shakespeare where you can embody what maybe your victims felt. And then maybe having empathy for other people, being able to understand situations, see world through the eyes of other people, I think was a great process for me.
Love that tie-in, love that connection, and very powerful. Thank you, Stephen. Let's move on. Michael.
I think that Steve and Haisan both married a concept that I think would be phenomenal. And that's the idea that when somebody is assigned a character or it's chosen for them or whatever, that that deliberately implementing like a method acting, like actually going around the prison, and I mean in a safe way, because obviously you don't want to be a character that's way crazy, doing crazy stuff, but to try to embody a character when you're not in rehearsal, when you're not in class, when you walk around, try to react to situations in a safe way, but in a way that your character would. I mean, you don't necessarily have to talk like you think they would or whatever. I mean, that's fine, but putting yourself in that character's headspace and doing that actual method acting and living that character, I think is hugely important. We talked about that before about making sure that, one of the things I said to continue doing is to keep spending time there. I can't overemphasize enough how important it is in anything that you do, that by investing your time in it, it becomes something that you care about. It's a way to artificially create a sense of mindfulness about something. And if you're thinking about your character and how he would or she would respond to a situation when you're in the lunchroom or at the library or out in the courtyard or whatever, I think that would fundamentally change a person's ability to embody that character once they're actually on stage. And I mean, there's all kinds of side benefits from that. You know, you see you see points of view that you may not, you know, otherwise see by actually acting out a character, especially if it's a character whose persona you don't agree with. You might not like that character. It's like being on part of a debate team where you're arguing for a cause that you don't necessarily like or believe in. There's no better way to learn to be compassionate and have empathy for somebody else than there is to pretend to be that person. And I think that's a hugely valuable thing. And I would seriously, like, I mean, you can't really hold people accountable for that because you can't chase them around the compound all day. But that's what I would say. I would say start um, assigning method acting, and we do a lot of journaling and stuff in class, that's sort of abstractly about the character that we have and, you know, how we relate to their life. Go a step further and actually implement that and have the inmate, you know, go and actually try to act like that character.
Thanks so much. Wonderful stuff. Rob has the next question.
Yeah, so now that we've started to think about, oh, I'd make this change or that change, let's dream into, as we sometimes say, or imagine a future, perhaps not that far off, perhaps not at all unrealistic, where it's you running the Shakespeare Prison Project, or a Shakespeare Prison Project, yours. What would that look like? Maybe you might want to give a generic description, or imagine a story, the same way that we drew on your stories from past experiences. Imagine something that happens one day or one time. Tell us a bit about what your project looks like. We've shuffled the order around so much that I'm gonna just randomly pick Haisan.
What my project looks like is a mix of interaction and more integration with the community. And when I say community, I mean former graduates, members who have moved on and moved into transitioning into community. And emphasis on victim empathy and understanding being part of the whole um that we're trying to create, because at the end of the day it's therapy. At the end of the day it's therapy. So the bridge being gap between prison and the community is huge, and I think the so my vision would have that level, those levels, guys that have been out being allowed or having some form of interaction with um the process, as and having the transparency where there people are able to see this guy was here and now he's out here and this is what he's able to do, to create that vision. You know, at during the point of my participation, freedom was like a ways away yet. And it would have been nice to have seen someone been where I was at and out there, you know, hey brother, you know, uh I ain't trying to reach back like from some place on high, but today I was right where you was, and this is where I am now, man. And just keep going, just believe in what you're doing, man. Please start believing in yourself. Know that you can do something beyond what you've done. You can reinvent yourself through this process. That's what I would want my vision to be.
Very powerful. Thank you. Michael?
Oh, John knows exactly what I'm going to say with this. I think it was my parting gift before I left. You know, we all bring our own experiences to the things that we do, and my background in the trades, I, you know, I think it's incredibly important. And me personally, if I was going to run a project, I would do it like like any kind of trade union. I would assign roles to people and have them fill those roles. Have somebody be, you know, like an assistant director, have somebody be the prop master, have somebody be in charge of costumes, in charge of holding other people accountable for their line readings. Not only does that help, you know, lighten the load for the facilitator, but it gives a purpose and a drive to people that feel generally powerless. And if you give them a responsibility where there's actually some currency to it, you know, there's a possibility that you might fail or that things might not work out or you might encounter conflict with somebody, but that's also an opportunity to grow and to learn and to, anytime you do something uncomfortable that makes you feel uncomfortable, it's generally because you're learning something. John always said, you know, that nothing human is alien to me or to us. And that's true. So like as long as you're learning something new, as long as you're trying something else, as long as you're being put in a position of authority, even if it's only for a couple of weeks, and then you change roles, you know, you make it so that one person's responsible for a set of props and whatever, and you rotate those roles, and you have it, you know, because that's the way it is in a trade union. You have somebody that's plays like the foreman or the steward or the general foreman or the superintendent, and you learn a lot about the cost of being an authority, and because of that you also learn some respect for authority, and it sort of diminishes the animosity that you might feel towards, you know, the people that are in charge. You realize that there's a lot of spinning plates, and then but when things do go well and you're able to accomplish something or develop a rapport with your co-actors and stuff, it's so rewarding to see that pay off. You know, that you might have to spend time tutoring somebody with their lines or whatever, but taking the responsibility to do that, to get you out of yourself, to contribute to somebody else and be part of a system, I that is the way that I would do it. I would absolutely run it like that. I would have people assign positions and then rotate them, and I think it would pay huge dividends.
Very powerful. As a lifelong unionist myself, I'm in full support of that. Steve, mate, you're up.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Michael. I sort of think something similar, in that instead of just thinking about doing this process for 12 weeks or 2 weeks or 6 weeks, taking that beyond the scope of the play. I find writing is a good mediator for me. It opens up different consciousness that I might not have thought of, takes me places where I might not have considered. I would try and bring in some sort of writing aspect. I know at one point we wrote poems through Kat Decker's Shakespeare program, and possibly can we start thinking about how Shakespeare would word it. But in continuance of moving from inside prison to outside prison, I would think about continuing the group on the outside, and like Haisan said, bringing in those authority figures, whether it's prison officers, police, judges, which would be difficult, but also nurses, bartenders, truck drivers, whatever, into the scope of the performance on the outside so that we can change the narrative about returned citizens.
Fabulous. Thank you. Jonathan's got an interesting provocation for us.
Yes, it's time to enter into dialogue, and we're going to ask for our returned citizens to kick it off. And then at some point, Rob and I will join in, but not right away. We have about 20 minutes left overall, just to give us a sense of where we are. And then we'll end with each one of our returned citizens making a final statement about what was most important for them in terms of this discussion, what really they would like people to remember, what they will remember. So beginning with the dialogue, just ask each other questions, note a point of connection, weave together a thread and develop an idea together. Take it wherever you want.
Right. Hey, I just want to say again, you know, it's amazing to me that from across the pond and everything that me, Haisan, and Steve here, we basically, you know, it's funny that having these totally different programs, just from our experience and being incarcerated, how like the idea of method acting and carrying our roles outside of class and investing in it long enough to really be able to embody that, how important that is. You know, I mean, there's an aspect of it that's maybe a little bit of an escapism, but it's not the same kind of escape that using a substance or getting in a fight and exerting power over somebody might get you. It's really about connecting with the character, being better at, you know, obviously the acting, which is sort of tangential to the whole process, but it gives you an opportunity to be more flexible and to learn how to like deal with, you know, situations where you get to employ nonviolent communication and restorative justice and a lot of things that are, I mean, what the program is about, what any program in prison is about. I have never seen, when I was at RCI, I had never seen staff members so conciliatory towards a program in prison. And I, you know, I spent a lot of time there. I mean, they usually rolled their eyes at everything that, you know, if people went to church or they went to Native American sweat lodge and all this stuff. The only thing I never seen staff members ever give anybody any flack about was the Shakespeare Prison Project. I mean, there were kerfuffles or whatever whatever you call them in whatever land you're from. There were issues sometimes with, you know, people causing problems for the program, but generally, yeah, it was always supported. And I think that if people were to go around the institution doing that and it being invested in it, they would appreciate and respect the fact that we were doing it.
And it was, when we, in the first few years, it was so new that the novelty kind of granted a certain amount of leeway, and we had made probably a lot of more discussion. Go, please, please, Steve, cut in.
Sorry, Haisan. I was a few minutes earlier, just to touch on Michael's point of the methodology. I think that through the experience, I started learning more about myself and some of those secrets that would come out through the text. And I would feel that other people would feel that, and we'd both share that moment. So for me, I started being vulnerable and allowing that vulnerability to pass on to others, and that if they were to come to me, that it would be trusted, and that I would help them or care for them or keep their secrets quiet. So there's other processes as well, growing together as a group, doing our little part, that I think, having come outside now, I can see that most people struggle with similar things. The three of us all touched on similar things just coming through that process. So I have more of an empathy with society. I have more tolerance towards other people who I might not agree with or have different inclinations or whatever it might be. That Shakespeare process helped me understand other people, help myself, and I've taken that outside now to assimilate in greater detail and with random people and society in general.
That's great point. There are so many things that we take from an experience like that, and you don't realize how it translates into our day-to-day lives. And all of a sudden, I'm recalling a somewhat emotional experience from Othello. From Julius Caesar, where Portia is questioning what Caesar, or what Brutus is about to do or what he's doing, and it kind of made me reflect on the things I was doing behind my lady's back, and how she was completely in the dark about some things. And even like now being married and having the type of wife that I have, where like I'm allowed to be completely open and have some like real like honest transparency. So if like I'm not so handsome at times, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? To be open enough to have that. The process was allow me to be vulnerable to growth, and that's from that I've had it. I see to respond to the question, what tools did the art correction programs give me? I don't see throughout our process, I developed so much as a human being, and it just happened to be like it hit a sweet spot for me where I had acknowledged that I was a creative spirit and therefore needed to feed my creativity. And I ended up in an institution through like some really convoluted way, in that I was in an institution that had a riot and staff members were assaulted, and like half the joint was locked down, and they threw me in SEG for trying to use the bathroom. And I ended up at RCI, and they threw me in the population, and I landed on a unit with a guy who was involved in the project, where I met Dr. Shailor and began my involvement with the Shakespeare Project. So um the the tools that came from do excuse me, I'm sorry. The tools that came from the process allowed me to meet Dr. Shailor and develop my leadership and reconcile that with where I was at in my personal development, where I understood that I was a creative spirit, that I was an artist, and that I had an opportunity in a prison setting to be an artist, to be creative, to be free. Like I can tell you that the way I did my time was that I was rarely locked up when I was in prison. I was as free as I had been when I was in prison, where I was done faking and trying to be anything. I was completely butt naked. And that was one of the phrases that kind of defined what we did. I tell everybody, get butt naked, man. Just do it. Be you, open up, allow yourself to feel something, to be about something bigger than you. And so those tools, so to build on that, I kind of was able to, I became a leader. I was able to be a leader, not just by virtue of ability, but by virtue of having kind of built a track record where we set the standard. This is what we do. We come prepared. We respect Dr. Shailor's time. We respect each other's time and have our lines memorized. Remember our blocking, take notes, and take care of your journal assignments, because that's just as important as anything else that we did.
Steve.
You know, Haisan, I think you and I would have gotten along very, very well if we'd have been in program together. Doc knows that was one of my biggest things coming into the program. I was a very, very rigid and inflexible person. And even probably, I mean, right up until I got ready to leave, I had almost quit a couple of times, actually, because of my frustrations with other cast members, you know. But going back to like the idea of being invested in the program, that was the thing that kept me going back, was that I had contributed too much to just like waste, you know, by walking away from it. It was like a dilemma that I faced routinely, because I was so frustrated with people that, you know, they would just mail in their effort, and they didn't take it seriously, and they were supposed to take it as seriously as I did. And, you know, through the program, just by meeting and confronting that conflict over and over and over again, where you had people that for whatever reason didn't you know, contribute as much as I felt that they should have, it eventually made me start thinking like, well, who am I really to dictate that? I don't know what they have going on in their life. And that was not a perspective that I really held before. You know, I had espoused mindfulness and all this other stuff, but it was always mindfulness about me and my interaction with the world. And that I cannot speak too greatly about, or emphasize too greatly, how important that as a life skill and a life tool is. Developing flexibility, you know, whether it's thinking on your feet by improvising, or by reading No Fear Shakespeare and trying to interpret the lines on your own, and like, all right, if this was my situation, how would you know, how would this be in my life, or how would I express this myself? All of those things, you know, focus on deconstructing your normal everyday way of, you know, habitually responding to things, and looking at them, analyzing them, but ultimately changing lanes for a little while, and being okay with that. Like you said about being open, you know, like when I was Portia and we had Foist, who I'm not going to say his last name, but, you know, and like acting all weird and erotic with him, you know, like during one of the plays. But I mean, like, you know, expanding boundaries, like I said before, about making people feel a little bit uncomfortable, and by doing that, it made me less rigid. Okay. And I got out on March 26th. I mean, like, I think on March 17th, I think, is when they put the whole like shelter in place order. And, you know, I had spent 6 years preparing to get out of prison and be like, back to the rodeo. And then this, you know, it was like the day the earth stood still. And honestly, a lot of the things that I developed in Shakespeare are what helped me sort of navigate through that. I still had problems, obviously, getting out, you know, when there weren't resources available and stuff. But what I thought about, and the things that probably contributed to me being okay with that situation was the fact that I had to meet a lot of situations that I wasn't okay with in Shakespeare. I was not okay with the fact that I had learned my lines early and on time, that I didn't go to the bathroom 3 times when I was, in group because John had made the effort to show up and he was giving us his time. Those things like made me angry, and I had to work through that. And it's just, it's tremendous that like now I can be so laid back about so many little things, not sweating the small stuff. And part of that is because you explore characters that sweat the small stuff and you realize this guy's being an idiot. In Shakespeare, you read about a character and like, this is a totally unreasonable person. Wait a minute. I do that same sort of thing. That means that I'm being unreasonable. Oh man.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have to cut in because of time. Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Michael. So I want to give Steve a chance because he's had something about tools that have helped him learn to be free on the outside. And then after Steve, I want to take at least a couple of minutes because I think it would be interesting to have Rob and I reflect briefly on what we've been hearing with each other. And then we'll give you guys the final word. So go ahead, Steve.
Well, to incorporate some of the men's answers there, I agree. And they were new tools that I learned that if people weren't learning their lines or they weren't where they were supposed to be or they were late or tardy, I am in my space now. And I started thinking that I am creating my personal growth through this session and other people are in other spaces. So I tried to let go of trying to be overbearing and telling them where they should be and not be, because, and in the end, there were times when we would get to the play and someone hasn't got all their lines and people would scream out from the back over the top of the partition, and that would become humorous to the play, and people didn't know better. So I just felt that it was more about trying to get in flow with the group and moving forward and just enjoying that space within myself for my personal growth. And through that I was more tolerant of other people and other things that are happening in our society.
I appreciate that, Stephen.
Definitely.
I appreciate that. That was where if I could reflect on my own, if we're going to criticize the program, I can criticize myself in that I was very rigid. I asserted myself as a leader and I ruled in a certain way. And I did not have the patience sometimes for that. And if I could change anything, that would probably be it. I was very stern with my castmates and I held them to a standard that whether or not they knew they were signing a contract with me, they were. And I made sure they knew it.
That's one of the best things I've heard so far in terms of how Shakespeare Project has changed me. And that is looking back at how you were in the Shakespeare Project and how you would want yourself to be different. That, there's some kind of connection being
absolutely
made. Really important.
And that's, I think, if anything, if it speaks to edify exactly what we're doing, is about personal growth. And I mean, every step we take should be towards something better, right?
Yeah.
So now Rob and I are going to reflect.
I want to listen to this.
Want me to go first,
What
Jonathan?
have you been hearing, Rob?
Oh, so much very powerful stuff, insightful, eye-opening for me. I hope for people who are watching as well. I fear that if I try and, summarize, I'm going to diminish the potency of what's been said. But I want I'll pick 2 things. One is the importance, the lack currently of support for people post-incarceration, returning citizens. And that's a structural thing. But that also how it would be extremely powerful for both those who are returning and those who are yet to return, who are still incarcerated, if there was some communicative flow between those 2 groups. If there was a way that those people could speak to one another, if there was a continuity, not necessarily continuation of programming on the one hand, but also how powerful it would be for returned citizens to return as free citizens to interact with the incarcerated. And
Mhm.
I know in Australia the laws make that very, very difficult, but laws are things that can be changed. The other one for me is, and I think Brené Brown would be very proud of us, that what came up was empathy, the relationship between empathy and vulnerability, but that empathy you get from, as a fellow who was in Rebibbia prison in Rome said to me, he'd been doing Julius Caesar for like 4 years, but he played a number of different roles. And I said, why are you still doing this after 4 years? And he said, every time I play a different character, to act their actions, to speak their words, I have to be able to think their thoughts in order to step into their shoes. And that's empathy. So that develops empathy. And the key thing today for me was the relationship between empathy, which is, oh, that's nice, empathy. But empathy makes transformation possible, and real transformation, not that kind of like, oh, yes, I know how you want me to say that I'm going to be, but a real sense of stopping, taking a moment to feel and think what someone else might feel and think. And that's how we transform and how we embrace the siblinghood of humanity. So thank you, fellas. That was really beautiful.
Beautiful. And I would just say, absolutely agree with everything that you just said in terms of your takeaways, Rob. The character work, the importance of the character work really came out for me in this discussion, and immersing yourself in the character, adopting the character's perspective and seeing the world through their eyes. I love this idea of playing multiple roles in a production, or role reversal, or as brought up in this discussion, I think by Steve, playing somebody with an experience or position similar to that of your victim. All really good, great ideas, and really at the core of, I think, what we do. But it's so important to hear this now and to have it reinforced for me during this time. So thank you. And lots of new ideas too. So we're going to give the final word to you three. Why don't we're going to go popcorn style, whoever talks first, but I think we have about, they're not going to cut us off. You have about a minute each, a minute or two.
I just wanted to say that I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity for that to participate in that program. I mean, it was like a golden nugget being found in a horrible, horrible place in a horrible situation. It was a safe place for us to be able to talk about things, to be able to relate to our personal life situations, whether it was being separated from family or being alienated from somebody that was important in our life. And it just helped decompress and eliminate a lot of anger just by like a purgative process. And I mean, you can't dictate and tell people that they have to participate in it, but it's really great that it's there if somebody needs it or if they want it.
Yeah, I think we watch our kids grow now, but it's true that they could be watching us grow too. So, as returned citizens, we are trying to grow into what's expected of us, what we think, and what we want to embody, how we want to contribute to society. So, I think the question, the answer is just for people to immerse themselves with returned citizens so that we can change the narrative, so that we can stop crimes, recidivism, that we can be better people together.
If we are as a community incarcerating people to create citizens that contribute and don't take away from it, behooves us to allow the understanding that a myriad of circumstances created the criminal, and then we need to address the human, and as a result of those many different pathways to prison, there are many different ways to address the issues that brought those to prison, and not as a total solution, but as part of a more comprehensive solution. Arts is definitely an answer for me, has been and will continue to be.
Thank you all, gentlemen, for a wonderful session.